Hello, everyone. It is 11 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, I am calling the 2026 second main business meeting of the World Science Fiction Society to order. My name is Jessie Lipp. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the presiding officer for this meeting. You will hear folks refer to me as either mixed presiding officer or mixed chair. We have some amazing staff. First of all, she doesn't have a slide, but most importantly is our presiding doggo. This is Zaza, who has apparently decided that she'll in addition to myself and Zaza, we have Martin Pine, he, him, who's our deputy presiding officer and parliamentarian. Ira Alexander uses they, them, who's our secretary. Olav Rockney, he, him, who's our timekeeper. And Alana Vincent, she, they, who is our slide presenter. We also have Kathy Bond, Warren Buff, Chris Hensley, and Chris Snyder moderating the speaker pool. Jed Hartman, who's been assisting with preparing all of the documentation. Anna Bradley, Gail Turman, and Terry Neal, who have been working the help desk and tech side of things. And Kirk Dingman and Adam Zuber are our Lumi technicians. This meeting is being captioned. You can turn the captions on by going to More Captions, Show Captions in the Zoom. If you are having any issues during the meeting, you can contact our help desk at bm-help@lacon.org or by using the help desk channel in the Discord. Speaking of which, we have a Discord. Please join it. If you have not already done so, there is a link to do so in the documents section of Lumi. And there's also a link on the LA member portal in the business meeting card where you access Lumi from. Please do note that these meetings are being recorded, with the exception of when we're in executive session. Related to that, if you wish to have your camera on during the meeting, you can do so. And if you're having bandwidth issues, you can disable incoming video in Zoom so that it's audio only in order to preserve bandwidth. The Documents tab in Lumi has the full agenda and the current standing rules and constitution, as well as a parliamentary procedure chart, which lists the different motions you can make. Please do note that it may take a few moments for items in the Document tab to load. If you're wishing to speak to an item of business, you'll click on the Speaker Pool tab. There, you'll select your purpose for speaking, such as a speech in favor, against, what kind of motion you're wanting to make, and then goodbye. And then in the text field, you'll enter the item number, such as F.1 or F.1 Jones Amendment. In the All Messages tab, we'll have a posted message that says what the current item of business is to help folks follow along with where we are. If you're selecting the other parliamentary option, you'll need to include what motion you're wanting to make in that text field. If you're joining from a multi-member household where you have multiple folks joining the meeting, but only one of you is in the Zoom, please make sure to put the name of the account that is actually connected to the Zoom in that text field so we know who to unmute. And if you're submitting a point of order, parliamentary inquiry, or request for information, it's very helpful if you give a brief explanation of your point or inquiry in that text field. However, not doing so will not prevent you from being recognized. If you're attempting to submit a request to speak for an item that is not yet before the body, in general, please don't do that. If you really need to do that, like if you need to make sure that a privileged motion is the first thing that's addressed, please include as much information as you can in your request to speak so that the moderators know how to handle it and when it should be brought up. If, on the other hand, you are attempting to speak on the item that is currently before us and you're concerned that I'm going to move on before you can get your request in, you can submit your request with just the item number and I will see it come in and recognize you accordingly. Especially when we're close to the point of resolving an item of business, I'm keeping a very close eye on the incoming requests to make sure that nothing sneaks by me. So if you submit something that's just like F.1, wait, or like just F.1, I will pause and make sure that you get recognized and that we handle whatever we need to handle. Once you've submitted your request to speak, it gets sent to the speaker pool, and our speaker pool moderators will take care of categorizing the request for me to then assign folks to the floor. When I recognize you to speak, please use raise hand in the Zoom to allow the Lumi tech to easily find you and request you to unmute. And you can have your camera on or not when you're speaking. It's your choice. As we move through the meeting and speakers are recognized and items of business are disposed of, we'll be archiving requests to speak. When your request has been archived, you'll see a response from the moderator indicating that has happened. If you submit a request to speak and you later change your mind, you can select retract a request and use the text field to indicate which request you're retracting. You don't need to retract a request that's already been archived. And in addition, we'll be archiving items as they're no longer relevant. So if you want to postpone something indefinitely and somebody else makes that motion, we'll archive the request for you. There's an option in the request to speak categories for a speaker pool report. This is a special privileged request for the presiding officer to report on the current population of the speaker pool. In addition, the slides that are being shared will include a count of the current number of requests in the speaker pool, the total number for, against, and for other motions such as amendments and refer to committee, stuff like that. Sometimes motions require a second. We'll be using the raise hand function in the Zoom to second motions. You can raise your hand as soon as the motion's made, and I'll also ask if there's a second. In the same way, sometimes I ask for unanimous consent of the body to do something rather than needing to take a vote. That will sound like me saying, is there any objection to? If you wish to object, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. Something that I know has come up. I try to be very conscious of the fact that like lag can happen. And so if you are needing to put your hand up for something else, like if I ask if there are any seconds or any objection, and you're not wanting to do that, but you're needing to put your hand up for something else, give it like a few seconds after I've said that there are no objections or that really that there are no objections, so that I know that you're raising your hand for something else and not because you were wanting to object and there was just some lag before you were able to get in. When it comes time to vote, the vote will automatically appear on your screen and you'll select how you wish to vote. You can change your vote just by clicking the other option, and you can completely cancel your vote by clicking cancel. I'll hold the vote open for about 30 to 90 seconds. I can see how many votes have been cast in real time, so I adjust how long I open the vote, how long I hold the vote open for, based on that. If there's 90 people in favor and 5 against, I don't really need to hold the vote open for longer. So we are going to go ahead and take a test vote right now, and so we can go ahead and open that vote. And the question before you is two wonderful museums in Los Angeles, the Getty or La Brea Tar Pits. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. So 48 to 39, the La Brea Tar Pits wins. Okay, great. We are going to, Alana, I'm really sorry to do this. I'm going to move the order around slightly and do committees and then talk about the special motions. Okay, we have some committees to announce. So Alana just spoiled it.
Just
Mark Protection
presiding
Committee
officer,
elections.
have you turned on recording?
Oh, yes, thank you. That was a reminder to me to do a thing. I need to press a button. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Mark Protection Committee. We had elections. Alana Vincent, Andrew January, and Warren Buff were elected. So congratulations to them. They will be serving 3-year terms that end in 2029. Let's see. And then we have the committee formed by D.5, Bidding, Trust, and Safety. So we had more folks express interest than that than was a reasonable size for the committee. So we went ahead and selected folks. So Alana Vincent will be chairing that. And then Anna Bradley, Brandon O'Brien, Chris Rose, Kathy Bond, Mara Machode, Olav Rockney, and Steve Cooper will be the members of that committee. And we will take care of getting all of your contact information to Alana so that they can take care of getting you all together and start sharing things. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today, we have two ratifications, E.14 and E.15 to handle. And then we have all of our new constitutional changes. We will actually be starting with F.8, the one that we started handling last time and then sent to committee. So we'll start with that and then proceed in order, starting with F.1. We have two motions that are normally only in order at the preliminary business meeting, but since we did not have a substantive debate on these items or substantive discussion on these items at the preliminary meeting, these motions are in order the first time these come up. So the first is the motion to postpone indefinitely. This drops the motion from the agenda without a direct vote and effectively kills the proposal for this year. It's automatically assigned 4 minutes of debate time and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. The second motion is object to consideration. This also drops the motion from the agenda without a direct vote and effectively kills the proposal for this year. There's another slide that you can jump to, Alana, or there should be. It is meant to be used when even consideration of the motion would be inadvisable, and it is not in order once any debate has occurred. It does require a 3/4 majority to pass. So both of those items are in order the first time motions come before the meeting. Okay, so I have a question about if the detailed results for the MPC are posted anywhere. Not yet. The detailed results will, of course, be in the minutes, like always, and I will try to get what is the word? Screenshots, that's what they're called, of the detailed results to put in the Discord this week. Right. Thank you, Warren. I am actually going to recognize Warren really quick for an announcement related to the MPC because we have good news.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. Just very quickly, Warren Buff, he, him. I'd like to share that since the last meeting, the Market Protection Committee has learned that our Australian trademark on Hugo Award has been approved. That will be in next year's report, but it was good enough news. I wanted to share it now. Thank you.
Yay, we're legal in Australia, or whatever the technical meaning of that is. Awesome. So, and we will also make sure to get that into the minutes in the Market Protection Committee report itself when those are published. Okay, so the first item, like I said, that we have in front of us is E.14. So this is business passed on. This is something that received first passage at last year's meeting. And if it's ratified at this year's meeting, will enter the Constitution at the end of this year. We have already set debate on this for 6 minutes. I think I didn't say this earlier, just as a reminder, when we set debate times, that's the total debate time. So 6 total minutes means 3 minutes in favor and 3 minutes against. So if there's anyone wishing to speak on E.14, they can submit a request to do so. Not seeing anything yet. There we go. Okay, I'll recognize Alan Bond for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. I proposed this amendment last year with the interest of removing postal address from the required information on the ballot. This is due to the fact that postal address is an unnecessary piece of information to determine if someone is a person, and that it is limiting to communities that are out there that do not have permanent addresses. I also wanted to change the information about what's shared into personal identifiable information so that it is very clear that any laws that are passed around personal identifying information are applicable in this situation. Thank you, Mixed Chair.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. And I don't have anybody else wishing to speak. I'll give you all a little bit of time to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak. Okay, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak. So we will go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.14 unnecessary PII. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. So with 77 in favor and 11 against, E.14 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this year. I did have a question come in. Yes, the agenda sidebar lists F.7 limitation of listed contributors. It shouldn't. That was withdrawn from the agenda, and I just forgot to edit the sidebar to remove that. So pretend it's not there. Okay. 1 second. I dropped my pen. I'll be right back. Okay. Our next item is E.15, end the false binary, which is on page 39 of your agenda. We have previously set debate time for this item to 10 minutes. I'm going to recognize Kevin Black for a speech in favor, and then I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
I'm Kevin Black, and I'm giving a speech in favor of this motion. This amendment makes almost entirely non-substantive changes to the Best Professional Artist and Best Fan Artist categories. The title, but not the substance of the Best Professional Artist category is changed in this to Best Artist in Professional Illustration, which by its text has been limited to illustrators whose work appears in professional publications since 1975, shortly after the first description of this category was published in 1968. This simply makes the title match the contents of the award. It also ends the implied opposition between the professional and fan artist categories, because while this seems intuitive to many people, experience has taught us that professionals can engage in fan art and fan artists can conduct themselves as professionals. And so it just seems sensible to make this change. Thank you. I appreciate your support.
Okay, 1 moment before you mute yourself, Kevin. I do have, I believe Dave Wallace is asking if you will yield for a question.
Certainly, Dave.
Recognize Dave first for that. Dave, if you can, yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, yes. So just a quick question. As I'm reading this, does this imply that anyone who's an artist whose work is primarily fan art, but who may have had one professional publication during the year would not be eligible for Best Fan Artist? I'm trying to understand how this would work here.
No,
or
I
can
don't
you
think
be eligible
so.
in both?
You can be eligible in both. Work, it doesn't say whose work has solely appeared in a professional publication. You know, you can have work in both realms.
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't quite clear to me from that without appearing in a professional publication phrase on the last there. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if there
Thank
we need
you.
a thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon.
I move to amend. I have sent amendment text in advance. It is also available on the Discord for people who want to see it in bigger font. All right. I'm going to explain what I'm doing. It probably will also count for speech in favor. So as passed last year, the language in E15 for the fan artist category created ambiguity around if it was just the work or the artist entirely that was disqualified because of an appearance in a professional publication. Thanks, Dave, for demonstrating that. My proposed amendment makes that much clearer. It also proposes to remove the word non-professional from the best fan artist definition. The word professional is not defined in the Constitution outside of the definition for a professional publication and is meaningless in this category given the inclusion of online or print-on-demand shops. What is a non-professional print-on-demand shops, and how would a nominator be able to tell? Lastly, in both categories, it specifies where the WSFS definition of a professional publication can be found, since our definition is more specialized than the common English understanding of those words. Even if you oppose the definition of the categories in this amendment, I urge you to pass it. In practice, E.15 does not actually change anything from the current definitions in terms of what is eligible, but it will make it easier to explain and administer while you get to work on coming up with something you think is better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the amendment, which is on your screen, is to, oh shoot, this isn't the version that highlights okay, sorry, I have to pull up two things. Here, Tammy, can you help me with the changes that you're making that are the changes that you're making and that aren't the original ones?
Yeah, so they're reflected in the text underneath in the bullet points. So
Yeah.
it just changed some of the language about instead of whose work, it says who displayed. So that's just sort of grammatical stuff at the beginning. It adds the 3.2.13 and it adds the word that work to reduce the ambiguity, and then removes the word non-professional.
Okay, sorry, I have to restate it and make sure that I get all of it. So I'm wanting to, okay. So that's the as described language. And sorry, I had a version that I made myself that noted which ones were from this and which ones were from the original, and I can't find it. About that work. Okay, and where's the... There it is. Okay. And should display also be struck after non-professional, or is just non-professional supposed to be struck?
Displayed gets moved to the above. An artist
Oh,
who
right. Yeah, because it
work
becomes a verb. Yep. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So the amendment is to strike in an artist whose work, to strike whose and insert who displayed, to insert after professional publication in both 3.13 and 3.18 as described in 3.2.13, to insert in 3.18 after, without, and before appearing in a professional publication that work, and to strike non-professional display, so that should the Coxon Amendment be adopted and E.15 as amended pass, the resulting language would be best artist in professional illustration an artist whose illustrative work in the field of science fiction or fantasy has appeared in a professional publication as described in 3.2.13 during the previous calendar year. Best fan artist, an artist an artist who displayed work relating to science fiction fantasy or SFF fandom in public, including in semi-prozines or fanzines at a convention or conventions, postings on the internet or in online or print-on-demand shops during the previous calendar year without that work appearing in professional publication as described in 3.2.13. So that is the Coxon Amendment. If Tammy gives me a nod that I said everything correctly, or a thumbs up, that works too. Great. I've already seen a second come through via Lumi, so it has been seconded. I have a parliamentary inquiry about whether this is a greater or lesser amendment. And I did want to clarify, so the reason I don't rule on whether or not something's a greater or lesser amendment, but I just offer my opinion until the amendment passes, is because in reviewing previous business meetings, there are several times where the meeting has spent over 15 minutes on handling appeals about whether or not changes are greater or lesser for amendments that then did not pass, or spent a lot of time on appeals for amendments that passed so overwhelmingly, it seems very likely that we would not have had to spend over 20 minutes on the appeal had the body already voted overwhelmingly to adopt the amendment, because the will of the body would have been clear. So that's why I don't actually make a ruling until the amendment passes, is to prevent the meeting from spending time on appeals that are actually unnecessary. And instead, I offer my opinion. And it is my opinion that these are changes that are essentially neutral language clarifying, neutral language that is just has the same effect, but is better clarity of phrasing than the original. And per a resolution and ruling of continuing effect that I don't have the number of in front of me, but I promise it exists, and Martin will probably get it to me shortly, that would be a lesser change. And so my opinion is that these would be Chair's ruling of 1983-02. And so my opinion is that these would be a lesser ruling, or a lesser change. Okay, so that's the amendment is what is currently in front of us. Debate time on amendments is automatically for
Mixed chair, we have
yeah.
to do 2/3 to consider.
We have to do 2/3 to consider. You're right. You know, it doesn't go well when it's like one of the first things that we have to take up, because my brain is not fully engaged yet. Thank you. Okay. Yes, per our standing rules, changes to business passed on, if they have not been submitted by the new business deadline, require a suspension of the rules to take up. So that's a 2/3 vote. And so first we will have the vote on whether or not to even take this amendment up. And then if that passes, we will get into the amendments itself. Thank you. Okay, so we can go ahead and open the vote on whether to take up the amendment to E.15. Like I said, this will require a 2/3 majority vote. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 90 in favor and 10 against, that is a 2/3 majority. And so we will go ahead and take up this amendment. So like I said, debate time on amendments is automatically set at 5 minutes. So that will be the debate time for this. And so we can go ahead and if there are any requests to speak. So we've already had a speech they can go in the second order folder, sorry, to be clear for my moderators. We've already had a speech in favor of the amendment. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak against the amendment yet, so I will recognize Kevin Black for another speech in favor of the amendment.
I'm just here to say I support this amendment.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Okay, I do not yet see anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment. So I'm going to give you all a little bit more time just to see if anybody else would like to speak to the amendment. Okay, so I do have a speech against the amendment. So I will recognize, just checking if, yeah, I will recognize promo code Chris. I'm guessing that's a registration quirk. I recognize that person for a speech against.
Hi, Chris Garcia. The wording of the amendment would seem to provide an even wider difference between the definitions of the professional artist Hugo and the best fan artist Hugo. While that might not be a bigger change, it does differentiate between the type of things that would be doable. The who displayed is actually relatively confusing to the matters. So I hope we wouldn't take it up.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against the amendment. I don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment. So I'm going to give you all a little bit more time, but I'm guessing that if anybody wanted to speak, they could have gone in, but I'll give you all about 15 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for a speech in favor. And then I'm going to recognize Sarah Felix for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Kat Corbetti, she, her. To my understanding, this does clarify what we have already. If people don't like the definitions as they are, they can work on a new definition in the coming years. But for now, some clarity would be really good. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. So that was a speech in favor. I'll recognize Sarah Felix for a speech against.
Okay. Am I there? Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. So we are just talking about the definition of the or the way that it's written here. But again, I'm like with Chris Garcia. I don't think that this really represents fan art as a description or definition.
Okay. I'm going to recognize, okay, since I don't have, wait, no, now I do have two. 1 second. Okay, I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Thanks very much, Mixed Chairperson. Just briefly in response to Kat Corbetti and Chris Garcia, we appreciate that this doesn't cover precisely all of the definitions of fan artists that that one might like to have there. We think it's broader than the current definition. We definitely think it's clearer than the current definition. And from the point of view of Hugo administrators, it's just really useful to have something that we can point to, which is more helpful than the current wording is. So I hope that people will vote in favor of this. And by all means, let's come back with further amendments in future.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor. Don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak against, or anybody else wishing to speak. So I will recognize Tammy Coxon for a second speech in favor.
I have to get my note back up. Just to respond to Chris Garcia, an artist whose work, all the language change here is changing the words, an artist whose work in public display and to an artist who displayed work, right? So that's the change that's happened. That's just grammatical. I don't think that is substantive in any way. I do not think these are the best definitions of fan art and professional art that we could come up with, but I do think they're better than what we currently have, certainly better for a Hugo administrator to administer. And so I would like to see this passed now.
Okay, thank you. So time for speech in favor of the amendment has elapsed. Olav, how much time do we have for against the amendment remaining?
We have 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Okay, I don't have anybody else wishing to speak against the amendment, but I will give you all just a little bit of time to see if there's anybody else who's wishing to speak. I will just take this as an opportunity to remind the body that, you don't have to use all the time, but you can. Okay, I will recognize James for a speech against the amendment. James, if you can raise your hand so that we can get you unmuted. There we go. It looks like you're unmuted, James, but your camera has gone off. So if you're speaking, I can't tell. Okay. It looks like James is having some audio difficulties. So we'll go ahead and move on. Okay. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to this amendment. So we will go ahead and open the vote. So this is on the adoption of the Coxon Amendment to E.15, which is on the screen. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. So with 94 in favor and 11 against, the amendment passes. And so we are back to E.15 as now amended. And so that language is still on the screen. So the parts that are highlighted are the parts that have now been incorporated into E.15. Olav, how are we doing on time?
We have 3 minutes and 45 seconds remaining for debate, of which 1 minute and 23 seconds is time in favor, and 2 minutes and 23 seconds is time against.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to recognize Gary Blogg for a speech against E.15 and then Laura Miller for a speech in favor.
Hang on, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I'm sorry. As much as I appreciate, the body of the work of the new definitions and everything, the title "Best Artist in Professional Illustration" is like nails on a chalkboard for me. The title just stands out like a sore thumb compared to every other Hugo Award title we have. Best novel, best dramatic presentation, best poem. This stands out, and best fan artist. This just stands out like a sore thumb. And to me, it's also grammatically incorrect. So I'm voting against it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was a speech against E.15. I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech in favor. And then promo code Chris again for a speech against.
Laura Miller, she, her. I am in favor of this because I feel that this is actually the way that we have been nominating in these categories for years now, and this clarifies the way that we have been honoring the artists for a while now, and I think it helps nominators. It helps obviously the Hugo administrators, as two have chimed in and said, actually administer these particular awards. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before I recognize Chris, sorry, y'all. I got ahead of myself and forgot that now that we've passed the amendment, I need to actually rule on whether it's greater or lesser. My apologies. Like I said previously, my opinion and also my ruling is that this is a lesser change because it is essentially neutral language that just clarifies and cleans up the wording of the original motion. So my ruling is that this is a lesser change. I'm going to give you all a little bit. If somebody wants to appeal the ruling of the chair, I guess they just raise your hand in Zoom, and I'll see if there's anybody wanting to do that. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody wishes to appeal that ruling. So I will now recognize promo code Chris for a speech against the amendment, and then I will recognize Joni Dashoff for a speech in favor.
Hi, Chris Garcia. The problem here is, again, the name of the first portion, Best Artist in Professional Illustration, because it 100% says that we are not considering other art as a part of the illustration aspect. And it also creates a distinction that art that is eligible for fan artists, i.e. Fan art, like fans, like you wave yourself with, sculpture, all of that is eligible in fan artists, but is ineligible, at least as I read it, in Best Professional Illustration, which is merely for an illustrator. And I believe that that idea is so wrong in a time when we have so much incredible art being made that is not illustrative in nature. So I really think that this is a really awful choice if we voted for it.
Okay. Thank you. That was a speech against, and I'm now going to recognize Joni Dashoff for a speech in favor.
Yeah.
You're good.
Thank you for allowing me to unmute. I'm Joni Brill Dashoff. I want this amendment to pass. It is true that the professional category is still illustrator focused, but overall, for the fan artist category, or rather, I should say, the previous iteration ties fan artists to display in a convention art show and does not include all the current possibilities, including online. If we do not pass this year, it will probably take another 20 years. And I'm not kidding. The last time we amended this was in 2006, because my son and John Picasso came up with the show works done in the calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. I do have a parliamentary inquiry about the role of subheadings in our Constitution from Linda Deneroff. So it is true that our rules state that the section numbers and the section headings are not considered substantive. However, in Article 3 of the Constitution, they kind of are, because they also serve as the name of the category, right? So while it is generally true that the subheadings for the sections aren't substantive, I'm at least not aware of a Worldcon that is chosen to call the Hugo Award categories by something other than the heading of that section in the Constitution. And so I think they clearly are substantive in this case. Okay. Okay, the timekeeper has informed me that we are out of time for speeches in favor, and that we have 1 minute remaining for speeches against. So I'm going to give, and I don't currently have anyone wishing to speak against. And so I'm going to give you all a little bit of time to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak against or make another motion. Okay, I'm going to recognize Allison Scott for a speech against.
So, as written here, it has a binary, and it basically says that art that is an illustration. So only if you're illustrating a science fiction story or a fantasy story can you be a best professional artist. Everyone else, no matter how much money they're making, no matter what they're doing, falls into best fan artist. Surely we can agree. We can't necessarily agree what exactly a fan looks like, but surely we can all agree that the fan artist category should be for fan artists, not any artist who happens not to be a professional illustrator. That's all.
Thank you. That was a speech against. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak against or make any other motions, but I'll give you just a little bit of time to see if there's somebody else. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. Okay, nope, sorry, we do. Okay, I'm gonna recognize Sarah Felix for a speech against.
Hi, so Sarah Felix, she, her. I agree with Allison. We are putting everybody else in the fan category, and that's kind of against the whole idea of how I understood fan artists to be. We really need to have better differentiation. Gosh, I'm sorry, I just got out of the shower. Differentiation between the two categories.
That is time.
Okay, thank you. So time has elapsed for speeches in favor and its speeches against. So I'm going to give folks just a little bit of time to see if there's any other motions that need to be made, but then we'll proceed to a vote if there's nobody else. I'll give you just a little bit of time. Okay. I do have a motion to call the question that came in, but with nobody else, with time elapsed and nobody wishing to make any other motions, we can go ahead and move to a vote. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.15 as amended. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote with 69 in favor and 32 against. E.15 passes as amended and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. Okay. So we are now going to jump to F.8, which is on page something. There it is, 49 of the agenda. Debate time on this was previously set to 10 minutes, and debate time does reset each day. This was referred to committee at the last meeting. And so I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon for a report from that committee.
Sorry, I was still catching up from the last one.
Sorry.
Give me a second to get myself in order. All right. Okay, so the F.8 committee met on email through the week and also consulted non-committee stakeholders. Rather than specify the Hugo Awards as excluded specifically, we used the more general language, unless the Constitution defines an alternative mechanism for that specific election, so that 6.4 is more resilient to future changes to the Constitution that might add other specified voting mechanisms. We also updated references to 6.4 throughout the Constitution to refer to 6.4.1 or 6.4.2 as appropriate to remove any ambiguity.
Okay, so the motion from the committee is to amend F.8 by, so we did technically amend it before it got sent to committee, and that was inserting language in 6.4.1 after single winner. So it's that was including the final ballot of the Hugo Award. So it's striking that and inserting unless the Constitution defines an alternative mechanism for that specific election, and inserting that same language after multiple winners in 6.4.2. And then in 6.2, inserting point 2 after section 6.4. And then in sections 3.12.1, 4-1.2, and 4-5.4, adding or inserting point 1 after section 6.4 to update those references as well. This motion comes from committee and so does not require a second. So debate time on amendments is automatically set at 5 minutes. And as a reminder for folks, we have now moved out of business passed on and into new constitutional changes. And so there's no 2/3 requirement to take up amendments because these have not received first passage yet. So anyone wishing to speak to the amendment can go ahead and submit their requests. And I will recognize Kayla Allen for a speech in favor. And then if I don't have any other speeches against, I will recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Thank you, next chair, Kayla Allen, she, her. I do somewhat regret having proposed the original amendment that triggered this whole can of worms, because it was later pointed out, and we need to remember this when looking at this at all. These changes overall to Article 6 are the general rules that apply unless there's any specific rule defined anywhere else in the Constitution. These are the defaults. And therefore, these additions that are this revised amendment, if you like, does it does the same thing. It states it in different words, but anything we do here changing this is just changing the defaults, and everything that is specifically defined elsewhere. Therefore, I'm in favor of this change. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I still don't have anybody wishing to speak against. And so I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Thank you very much, Mixed Chairperson Nicholas White, he, him. I'm the maker of the original amendment. I welcome the work that has been put in by the committee over the last week to tighten it up and tie it in more concretely to the Constitution. I would say that anybody who is still a bit confused as to what this is all about, please do have a look at pages 51 to 57 of the business meeting agenda, which I think lay it all out fairly clearly, particularly pages 51 and 52. But apart from that, I think we now have a very solid basis for moving forward, and I urge the meeting to vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I still don't have anybody else wishing to speak against it. So I will recognize Warren Buff for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. Warren Buff, he, him. Basically, what the committee's come up with is a good way to accomplish clarity without creating redundancies in the Constitution that might make future amendments more difficult to get right. Therefore, I'm in favor of the committee's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor. I still don't have anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment. I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak. Okay. I still don't see anybody wishing to speak to the amendment, and so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of the amendment to F.8 that is on the screen. The amendment adds language of unless the Constitution defines an alternative mechanism for that specific election in both 6.41 and 6.4.2 and clarifies which part of 6.4 it's referring to in other parts of the Constitution. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 83 in favor and 3 against, the amendment passes. And so we are back to F.8 as amended. Olav, can we get a time check on F.8? Oh, I heard sound and then it went away. There we are.
We have 7 minutes and 40 seconds remaining for F.8.
Okay. It's plenty of time on both sides, hopefully. Okay. So anyone wishing to speak to F.8 can go ahead and submit the request to do so. And I'm going to recognize Ron Oakes for a speech in favor.
Okay, I would like to just, Ron Oakes, he, him. I'll point out that this makes a lot of sense to me, looking at both the information that's provided in the agenda. And also this algorithm, while it is not entirely straightforward, it is easy, fairly easy, straightforward to understand. I definitely have full confidence I could implement it. Yes, I have had 30 plus years as a software engineer, have a PhD in computer science. But unlike another algorithm that got specified into the Constitution, this one I confidently feel I could implement and get right. So I think this is clear. I think it's straightforward and it fixes a real problem. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. I still don't have anyone wishing to speak against, and so I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor of F.8.
Cliff Dunn here. I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of this, but to the extent that there is still some concern about confusion and so forth, I think it might be good if we were to informally understand that we can have a review and see if people are still confused after a year or two of implementation, and if maybe a guide needs to be printed at some point. But otherwise, this is good to go.
So, Gray, are you wishing to make an amendment to add a sunset clause, or you're just wanting us to If you wish to make an amendment, can you raise the hand in Zoom? Okay, I don't see Gray's hand being raised, so that was not the intention. Okay. Okay, I still don't have anybody else wishing to speak against the amendment. And so I will recognize Jack Foy for a speech in favor.
Mixed Chair Jack Foy, he, him. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I want to point out that in committee, it was pointed out that the first few conventions that are likely to be practicing this are already nationally familiar with single transferable vote, and so we'll have a good opportunity to set precedent for use of this process.
Thank you. As a speech in favor. I don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak to F.8, so I'm going to give a little bit of time to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak, and if not, we'll move to a vote. Okay, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to F.8, so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of F.8 as amended. And we can go ahead and close the vote. So the amendment, the F.8 passes and will go to the 2027 business meeting for ratification. Okay, so we are going to move back in our agenda to F.1. So we are going to move to F.1, the Ethics Ombuds Office, which is found on page 40 of your agenda. Debate time on this was already set to 10 minutes. Do I have somebody from, I believe we have an amendment that's being offered. Do we have somebody from the committee that's wanting to speak to the motion first? Okay, I'm going to recognize Kimberly Hansen for a speech in favor, and then I will be recognizing Gary Blogg after that. You need to unmute yourself, or I believe so we're not hearing your audio, so you may need to check your browser permissions. No, I'm still not able to hear you. You check your audio settings to make sure that it's recognizing the correct microphone. Nope, we still cannot hear you. No, I cannot hear you. Is there somebody else from the committee who would be able to speak to this? Okay, I'm going to recognize Alan Bond. Okay, great. Alan's raised his hand. It's like you've been nominated in my staff chat to speak, whether you know it or not. So
yeah, sorry, I did not prepare a speech on this. Kimberly Hansen had. I'll say what I can. Thank you, Mixed Chair. This proposal is to start the process of permanently establishing the Ethics Ombuds Office that we previously established as a temporary request to the Marks Protection Committee. The intention of this is to create an investigative body that people can bring concerns to, that will refer those issues either to the currently seated Worldcon or to the MPC, depending on which body should have jurisdiction over those issues, and provide a report annually. We believe that this is important to have a third-party body that is not involved with the Worldcon committees to be able to review things and determine if the license agreement and ethics policies are being followed. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a speech in favor, and I'm now going to recognize Gary Blogg.
Hi, Gary Blogg here once again, he, him. I have 3 amendments I sent to both, yep. All of them are to 1.9 by 1.9.2. The first I want to change from just 3 members to at least 3 members. I think more voices, more eyes on these issues, the better. 3 just said it's a flat, straight stone, set in stone number. You can't change it. The second amendment I have is only 1 member of the MPC can serve on this committee and may not serve as a chair. I want this committee that answers to the MPC to be completely independent. I don't want it to be just 3 members of the MPC, for example, 3 members of the MPC to sit on this committee as well. I think it would not be an independent or, you know, whatever kind of committee it is. I want only 1 member to be on that committee. The other issue is that on September 1st, LAcon will become an immediate past Worldcon, whereas, you know, Montreal, and if they win it, Brisbane will become the seated Worldcons. And I think that nobody from LAcon should be on this committee, because any issues that would be brought up after September 1st, for instance, will most likely be dealing with things that happened at LAcon. I will allow the chairs and the head boards, if this should be brought up individually or as one, or all 3 together as amended. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. So yeah, we will take this as 1 amendment. So, and it has been seconded via Lumi. So the amendment is to, in section 1.9.2, insert at least after shall consist of. After from time to time determine, insert only 1 member of the MPC can serve on this committee and may not serve as chair. And after currently seated Worldcon committees, insert the immediate past Worldcon committee, so that 1.9.2 in its entirety would read: the Ethics Ombuds Office shall consist of at least 3 members appointed by the MPC in accordance with such application process as the business meeting may from time to time determine. Only 1 member of the MPC can serve on this committee and may not serve as chair. Chairs, division heads, and the leadership of currently seated Worldcon committees, the immediate past Worldcon committee, or active bids for future Worldcons are ineligible to serve. So that is the amendment that is before us. It has been moved and seconded. Debate time on amendments is automatically set to 5 minutes. So I have a request for information from Chris Rose. Does this imply that the committee must be fully constituted at the close of a Worldcon? I'm going to go ahead and recognize Chris Rose to clarify his question, because I'm not sure if you mean the Ombuds Office Committee or the Worldcon Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Chris Rose, he, him. My question is to clarify whether the Ombuds Committee must be constituted at the immediate end of the Worldcon, as it constrains membership based on the current seated Worldcon.
All right. So I think that so basically what you're asking is, like, if at the close of a Worldcon, once, because an election has happened or a site selection has happened and we have a new committee, if that like drops the membership of the Ombuds Office below 3, like does the MPC then need to like immediately take care of that to get it back up to 3, is essentially what you're asking. I saw you nod, so I'm going to recognize Chris Rose again.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot I was on video. Yes, that's what I'm asking. I have several questions about that, but this was the one that jumped immediately.
Okay, great. And as a reminder, requests for information are directed to the chair. So by the text of this, I mean, yes, basically, as soon as the ombuds office does not consist of at least 3 members, it would be the job of the MPC to get it back up to 3 members. In all committees, there are sometimes periods of vacancy when there's a spot open before you're able to fill it, and that's fine. But it would be on the MPC to fill any such vacancies, as quickly as is reasonable and possible. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I don't have anybody wishing to speak against the amendment, so I'm going to recognize Alan Bond for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I would like to speak in favor of this. These are things that we did discuss and it were the intent. The intent was to have the bulk of the Ombuds office not to be part of the embassy or any Worldcon committee. And so it is a requirement for an advisory board for at least 1 member to be a member of the board of WIP, which is made up of the members of the MPC. So this amendment is consistent with that need, while meeting the intent of having this body be separate from the MPC and a third party.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for a speech against the amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Kat Corbetti, she, her. Less of a speech against the whole of the amendment and more of a slight concern over at least 3 members, just because it is not clear enough how many positions there should be on this committee, and therefore how many spots are there for, say, an election. It just doesn't really clarify. If we want more than 3, perhaps we should be changing the number rather than at least, because the inconsistency might get a little unclear over the years. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was a speech against the amendment. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the point that was raised about potentially ending up under 3 temporarily, the at least actually I think resolves that, because you can bring a 4th member on board and get them onboarded, or even a 5th if you know you're going to lose somebody because they're likely to end up being on a seated Worldcon committee or similar. It also would allow some flexibility if, due to the nature of some complaints that are coming up, we need to bring in specialists or something like that to serve people with experience in a given area. So I think having some flexibility on the membership rather than being locked to an exact number is probably a good thing, given how much of a wide universe of complaints could conceivably come in.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. One moment, I need to confer with my parliamentarian about something. Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. Okay. I am going to recognize, okay. So I'm going to recognize Arturo Serrano for a motion. Okay, Arturo, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. However, I know what the motion Arturo was going to make was, so I will just go ahead and say that on his behalf. So Arturo is making a motion to divide the question to consider the three amendments separately. So the motion to divide the question is when we have motions that are a motion related to a single subject but that contains several parts, each of which is capable of standing on its own. They can be separated and voted on as if they were distinct questions. So basically, three separate motions. This is not a situation where, so there are times when we take up completely independent resolutions together. And when that happens, like when we take up multiple eligibility extensions together, when that happens, the request of a single member is enough to divide those questions into separate motions. However, this is a case where the motions are related to each other. They could stand on their own, but they are all related to the same subject. And therefore, the request to divide is a motion that the body gets to vote on. I see a hand from a member of my team. Warren, are you? I'm going to recognize Warren in case he has something I need to hear.
I was just raising my hand to second.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I hadn't asked for a second yet. So you got there so quickly, I thought it was for something else. Okay. So it has been seconded, the motion to divide the question. So the motion to divide the question is not debatable, and it requires a majority vote. And so what the function of this would be is if the motion to divide the question passes, then we would take up the three parts of the blog amendment separately. So we would take up the insertion of at least, and then we would take up the only one member of the MPC can serve on the committee insertion, and then we would take up the immediate past Worldcon committee insertion. So those three parts would be taken up as separate votes and as separate discussions if we still have debate on them. The motion to divide the question, like I said, requires a majority vote and is not debatable. And so we can go ahead and okay, so I have a parliamentary inquiry of is it into three parts or some other way? So the motion to divide the question is amendable. So you could, what I'm going to say is, I don't see a way that it would be possible to divide the question into more parts than three. And trying to amend and vote on dividing it into some combination of 2 and 1 would, I'm almost confident, take more time than just if we want to divide it, dividing it into 3 to start with. So I'm going to say that we're just going to vote on whether to divide it into those 3 parts rather than getting into 2 and 1 or 1 and 2 or, you know, the different possible combinations, of which there are only 3 because that's how permutations work. Okay. So we can go ahead and open the vote on whether or not to divide F.1, the amendment to F.1. This requires a majority vote. I'm going to leave the vote open for another 15 seconds. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. So with 54 in favor and 41 against, the motion to divide passes. So we are going to call Amendment A, the insertion of at least. Amendment B, the only one member of the MPC. And Amendment C, the immediate past Worldcon committee portion. I'm going to recommend a total remaining debate time for each of these amendments of 2 total minutes, not to be taken out of the total time for F.1. Is there any objection of those proposed debate times of 2 total minutes for each portion of the divided amendment? Okay, seeing none, debate time is set at 2 total minutes for each of the 3 amendments. Alana's working on getting it all up on the screen, and we'll be futzing with colors to make sure it's all readable. Okay, so the first item in front of us, and I'm going to tell my staff we're going to keep using the second order folder for this. So the first item in front of us is the insertion of at least before 3 members. That will say at least 3 members, Amendment A. If we can go ahead, because of dividing the question, can we go ahead and, to my staff, can we go ahead and clear the current requests in the second order queue? If you had submitted a second order, if you had submitted a speaking request related to the amendment before it was divided, and you still wish to speak to that, to Amendment A, the at least insertion, please go ahead and resubmit that request so that the staff can understand what's going on. Okay. I do have a motion to call the question on Amendment A. I do not yet have anyone saying they wish to speak to Amendment A, but I did clear a couple requests to speak out. So I am going to give... Okay, so we do have... So the original maker of the amendment wishes to speak in favor to the insertion of at least to respond to a previous discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and recognize Gary Blogg for that, because I was just letting you all know that there was a motion to call the question, not that a motion to call the question had actually been made yet. So I'm going to recognize Gary Blogg.
Just one thing that Kat Corbetti said earlier, and it does relate to at least. The MPC can set up however members they want, but putting the number at least, gives us leeway on it. The other thing that Kat said was, is this elected? No, it says appointed only. So this position currently, as stated, they are all appointed by the MPC. So it's not elected like we have like last week when we had the MPC election. So this is all appointed. And the last point is one issue regarding at least is because finding people who want to both serve on this committee and also who are not disqualified by the final sentence, even if whether or not it gets amended or not, but being disqualified by the final sentence may be hard to do. So I'm in favor of this amendment.
Okay, thank you. So that was a speech in favor of Amendment A. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to Amendment A. And so this is the amendment to insert at least before 3 members. Okay, I do have. Okay, I'm going to recognize Jack Foy for a speech against. If anybody else submits a request to speak on this item, I will recognize the motion to call the question that's still in the queue, just as an FYI for everyone. I'm going to recognize Jack Foy for a speech against.
We should have a fixed size of this pool. That's the whole speech.
Thank you. Okay, so that was a speech against Amendment A. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to Amendment A. Okay, we can go ahead and move to a vote. So Amendment A is the insertion of at least before 3 members. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of Amendment A to F.1. Okay. We can go ahead and close the vote with 58 in favor and 30 against. Amendment A passes, and so at least is inserted before 3 members. So that moves us to Amendment B, which is the insertion of only 1 member of the MPC can serve on this committee and may not serve as chair. So anyone wishing to speak to Amendment B should submit a request to do so. I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a speech against Amendment B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Chris Rose, he, him. I believe that this amendment introduces a risk that a chair could appoint someone to the Mark Protection Committee in order to eject them from the Ombuds Committee as constituted, and we should not include this to provide chairs seated or otherwise that lever.
Okay. So that was a speech against Amendment B. I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor of Amendment B.
People have to consent to being assigned to the Mark Protection Committee, so someone could not be forced to be off this committee.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of Amendment B. I don't have, nope, I do. Okay. Okay, so I have a parliamentary inquiry about the use of may versus can. I'm going to say that's editorial, and the secretary will review if updating that language is necessary, and can make that determination. Okay, I'm going to recognize. Okay, I have a question of privilege, asking for that Chris's speech was a little too fast, so I'm going to restate it, and if Chris disagrees with what I said, he can raise the hand. Chris was saying that he didn't want there to be a situation where a chair of a Worldcon appointed somebody to the MPC specifically for the purpose of having them no longer be able to serve on the ombuds office. And so was concerned about the phrasing of Amendment B allowing that sort of possibility. Tammy Coxon then pointed out that people have to consent to appointment to the MPC so that that would prevent that from happening. Okay, I'm going to recognize RKOV for a speech against Amendment B.
Rick Kowalczyk, he, him. We're appointing people to the MPC because we trust them. I think we need to continue to trust them. In the past, I've trusted people to recuse themselves, and we have a limited pool of volunteers. I think that overly restricting this pool is not in our best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against Amendment B. I do not currently have anybody else wishing to speak to Amendment B, so I'm going to, there we go. Okay, I'm going to recognize Gary Blogg for a speech in favor of Amendment B.
I want to respond to Rick Kowalczyk. Rick, this has nothing to do with the MPC. This is with the Ethics Ombudsman Office. So it's the MPC that appoints people to this committee, not Worldcons or anybody else appointing to the MPC. So I'm still in favor of this amendment.
Okay, that was a speech in favor of Amendment B. Going to give you all a little bit of time to see if anybody else wishes to speak to Amendment B. Okay, since there's nobody else wishing to speak for a first time, I will recognize RKOV for a second speech against Amendment B.
Rick Kowalczyk here. Since it was clear that Gary didn't understand my intent, if members of the MPC feel that they are the best people to serve on the Ombuds Committee, I trust them to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against Amendment B. Okay. I have, okay. We have a motion to call the question on Amendment B. We currently have 3 people wishing to speak in favor of Amendment B, nobody wishing to speak against. Is there any, I'm going to ask first if there's an objection. Well, sorry, I need a second first. Is there a second for the motion to call the question? Okay, I see several seconds. Thank you. Can lower all the hands, please. Is there any objection to moving to a vote on Amendment B? If so, please raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote on Amendment B. And so this is the insertion of only one member of the MPC can serve on this committee and may not serve as chair. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of Amendment B. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. Okay, with 70 in favor and 24 against, Amendment B passes. I have a question of privilege related to our bio break. So per the agenda, our bio break is scheduled for about 10:45 a.m. Pacific time. It's currently 10:35 a.m. Pacific time. So what I'm hoping to do is get through F.8 and then take our bio breaks. We will see where things stand after Amendment C, and we will either take our bio break then or after F.8 is handled. Okay.
F.1, right?
F.1. Yep, sorry, we already handled F.8. I meant F.1. The thing we're doing, that's the thing I'm talking about. Okay, so the question ahead of us is now Amendment C to F.1, the insertion of the immediate past Worldcon committee on the list of those who cannot serve, leadership of those. Okay, anybody wishing to speak to Amendment C can request, can submit a request to do so. I don't yet have anyone wishing to speak to Amendment C. Okay, I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor of Amendment C.
Thank you, mixed chairperson Nicholas White, he, him. I'll be honest, I'm against F1 as a whole, but I think if we're going to have it, we have to have this amendment. We all know why we're here. We're here because there was very bad malpractice on behalf of Worldcon committee, and we can't have the people who were involved with that in the committee that is reporting back on potential malpractice. So I think this amendment simply makes sense, and we have to vote in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of Amendment C. Okay, I have a motion to call the question on Amendment C, and I don't have anybody else wishing to speak. Is there any objection to moving to a vote on Amendment C? If so, please raise the hand in Zoom. Okay. Seeing none, we can go ahead and move to a vote. So we can open the vote on the adoption of Amendment C, the insertion of the immediate past Worldcon committee. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote with 81 in favor and 6 against. The amendment C passes. Okay, so that handles the divided amendments. And so we are back to F.1 as amended, which is on the screen. Sorry, I'm trying to review something. Okay. I have another amendment and a referral to committee that have been submitted. So I'm going to say that we are going to go ahead and take our bio break now, and then we will pick F.1 back up when we return. So we will return at 7 minutes prior to the hour, whatever your hour is. And we are in recess until then. Okay, it is 7 minutes prior to whichever hour you are in. And so we are going to come back into session. Okay, so what is in front of us? We are on F.1, which is on page 40 as amended, which is on your screen. I'm going to recognize Farah for a speech in favor of F.1.
Am I on?
Yep, you're good.
Thank you. Sorry, the break had actually thrown me slightly. Speech in favour, essentially that this kind of Ombuds office has been put in informally with Easter cons, where when we've had complaints we can't handle because there are conflicts of interest, we call on people who are previous chairs of other conventions. This is a formal version of that in order to meet the needs of Worldcon, but essentially it's about making sure that people have a route they can go where they feel supported and where they feel they're not actually dealing directly with the people that they're having problems with or having an issue with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.1. So I have a motion to call the question on F.1. So per our rules, the current state of requests to speak is there are none in favor, none against, and there is also a motion to refer to committee in the speaker pool. Is there a second to the, okay, I do see a second for the motion to call the question. Okay, so first I'm going to ask, and the motion to call the question is not debatable or amendable and requires a 2/3 vote. It closes debate and the making of additional motions on the current item. First, I'm going to ask, is there any objection to moving to a vote on F.1? If so, please raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, there is an objection. Thank you. And so we will vote on whether to call the question. And so this requires a 2/3 vote. And we can go ahead and open the vote on whether to end debate on F.1. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote with 73 in favor and 14 against. That is a 2/3 majority, and so the motion to end debate passes. And so we will go ahead and move to a vote on the adoption of F.1 as amended. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of F.1. Okay. We can go ahead and close the vote with 78 in favor and 13 against. F.1 passes. And so we'll go to the 2027 business meeting for ratification. Okay, that brings us to F.2. There's no business like virtual business, which is on page 40 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has been set at 10 minutes. I will just remind the body that we're a little more than halfway through today's meeting, and we do still have items F2 through 6 and F9 still to take up, as well as the eligibility extension. F.2 comes to us from the business meeting study group. I believe Adam or Mara Michaud is who's going to be speaking to this, but anybody wishing to speak to F.2 should submit a request to do so, and I will recognize Adam for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Adam Michaud, he, him. This proposal works together with, I believe it was C3, which was already approved, to reduce ambiguity and clean up certain language to ensure that virtual business meetings work as well as physical ones under our rules. As I mentioned in the earlier session, none of these changes will require virtual meetings, but just allow each Worldcon to choose what best meets their needs on an equivalent procedural footing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.2. I don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak to F.2. If you wish to speak, please submit a request to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech against F.2.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. This motion implicitly recognizes that the rules actually said we could not hold virtual meetings, notwithstanding actions taken by this meeting and the one before it. I do believe that it would be more appropriate that we have at least one meeting held under the rules as they are currently written, vote to take away those rules. And therefore I'm opposed to this motion. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.2. Okay, I do have, okay, I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a speech in favor of F.2.
Thanks, Mixed Chairperson. Chris Rose, he, him again. This set of rule changes, as was covered in the discussion in the prior standing rules change, acts as a clarification, again, to sort of emphasize Adam's own comment to that effect. The purpose here is because there have been multiple parties complaining about the ambiguity of the rules that led to the chair's ruling. The chair's ruling was upheld. We have all collectively, by consensus, accepted that this is the correct structure. Let's get it written down so that we don't have to have secondary sniping about whether or not this is the correct way to hold our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.2. I do have a question of privilege. Chris, if you speak again, apparently there are some folks who would like you to be a little closer to your microphone and are having troubles hearing you. So just FYI for you. Okay. I do have a motion to call the question on F.2 from Gray Anderson. Is there a second? Okay, I do have several seconds. Thank you. So currently we have 2 people wishing to speak in favor of F.2, no one wishing to speak against, and no other motions in the pool. Is there any objection to moving to a vote on F.2? If so, please raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote on F.2. So we'll require a majority vote, and we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of F.2. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote with, there it is, 90 in favor and 9 against. F.2 passes, and we'll go to the 2027 business meeting for ratification. That brings us to F.3 conversion rights, which is found on page 42 of your agenda. Debate time on this was previously set at 6 minutes. I'm going to recognize probably Gray Anderson, yep, for a speech in favor as the submitter. And anybody else wishing to speak to F.3 can submit a request to do so.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Can you hear me?
We can.
Cool. Thank you, Mixed Chair. Left Dunn here again. This arose out of the Chengdu membership situation. I understand that there are some concerns from some folks that this would weaken the Constitution, but I think effectively guaranteeing that people will have 90 days to convert if a bid is seated and their website is not operational actually helps reinforce the Constitution and reinforce people's rights, especially if there are significant issues. It also clearly signals to committees that if there are issues taking memberships in that conversions in that time frame, that they should give people an ample opportunity to convert, even if that means extending the period in which they let them remain eligible at the minimum rate. So I think this plugs a hole.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.3. I do not yet have anybody else wishing to speak to F.3. I'm going to give you all just a few more moments to see if there's anybody wishing to speak to it. Okay, I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech against F.3.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. Nicholas White, he, him. This amendment is unnecessary. It over-engineers the rules. We really don't need it. It's set up to deal with a particular situation that happened 3 years ago. I recommend that we vote against. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.2. I don't have anybody else yet wishing to speak in favor of F.2, so I'm going to recognize John Coxon for a speech against F.2, and then Laura Miller for another speech against if there's not yet a speech in favor. John Coxon, if you can raise the hand in Zoom so we can get you unmuted. Okay, maybe John has stepped away. Okay, Laura Miller, I'm gonna recognize you for a speech against if you want to raise the hand.
Yes, Laura Miller, she, her. Thank you. I agree with Nicholas. I think this is a solution in search of a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against. I think I've been saying F.2. I mean F.3. If I've been saying F.2, I mean F.3. Once again, I mean the thing we're on. If I'm saying something else, I mean the thing we're on. Okay, that was a speech against F.3. I'm going to recognize Mike Kirpin for a speech in favor of F.3, and then we'll see if we can recognize John Coxon for a speech against.
Hi. I'd like to speak in favor of this. The rules as they currently stand make it appear as if Worldcons are limited to a 90-day window with a literal reading of the text. By changing this, it makes it clear that a Worldcon can hold conversions open for as long as they like, as long as it's at least 90 days. I don't see why anybody is against giving them more flexibility.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.3. Okay, I'm going to try and recognize John Coxon for a speech against F.3, and then Joshua Cronengold for a speech in favor of F.3. Were you able to get? Okay. Still not seeing. Oh, I think John might have just dropped entirely. Okay. I think I have another speech against though. Okay, yeah. I'm going to recognize Ron Oakes for a speech against F.3, and then Joshua Cronengold for a speech in favor.
Ron Oakes, him. I'm concerned that if this passes, it's just going to encourage bids to not worry about getting prepared to do conversions at and immediately after Worldcon, because they can now just say, oh, we can get it ready anytime. We'll then have the 90 days to do it. I yield.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against F.3. I'm going to recognize Joshua Cronengold for a speech in favor.
Joshua Cronengold, he, him. So this is a punishment against Worldcons that don't get their stuff up by the deadline. But it's an extremely proportional punishment. Sure, it is very rare that we have the situation come up, but just in case it should, the rules should account for it, and currently they don't.
Okay.
And they have.
Okay, that was a speech in favor of F.3. I'm going to recognize Alan Fleming for a speech against F.3. And then I'm going to recognize RKOV for a speech in favor of F.3.
Hi there, Alan Fleming, he, him. Thank you, Mixed Chair. Constitutions don't need to cover every eventuality, especially when these eventualities happened once under very specific circumstances. We don't need to do this. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.3. I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen, RKOV for a speech in favor of F.3. And then Chris Rose for a speech against. And then, spoiler alert, Kayla Allen.
Rick Kowalczyk, he, him. This may have only happened once, but the issue leading to the ombudsman situation or ombudsman group also happened once, and everyone thought that was necessary to change the Constitution. I think that is well worth putting this in the Constitution to stop this from happening again and to encourage Worldcon committees to do the right thing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.3. I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a speech against F.3 and then Kayla Allen for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. Chris Rose, he, him, microphone closer to mouth. I would like to address specifically the idea that the business meeting is responsible for punishing Worldcons. I think that that's a position that we as a meeting should not be in. We are not a disciplinary party for Worldcon committees. This is this is WSFS. We are all WSFS. I personally find that deeply uncomfortable, and I hope that as a group we choose not to vote out of some misguided idea that we need to be punishing people. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against, and I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I'd like to respond to Mr. Kirpin's speech earlier. The rules here are establishing a minimum time, not a maximum. Worldcon committees could keep that rate for the entire length of their time alive. This simply sets a floor, not a ceiling. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.3. Olav, how are we doing on time?
Thanks to some brief speeches, we have 50 seconds remaining for time in favor. We have 1 minute and 25 for speeches against.
Okay, thank you. We don't have anybody else wishing to speak against yet, so I will recognize Joni Dashoff for a speech in favor.
Hey, thank you. I am now unmuted. I have been site selection admin twice, and it may take, you might have, no, the elected committee could have technical difficulties translating the membership into their format, whatever platform they're using. And we're getting close to needing language translation for everything. Montreal definitely had that. We are talking potentially bids from Germany and France and somewhere in Africa that will need a translation to their home language. And last but not least, quit picking on it. Back in the past one, I had someone complain to me this month about how they were unable to convert in time for LA and had to pay a full rate. Thank you. I'm done.
That was a speech in favor of F.3. I don't currently have anybody else wishing to speak to F.3, and I do think that you all have had ample time to submit requests to speak, so I'm just going to give you about 10 seconds to see if there's anything coming in. Okay, seeing nobody else wishing to speak, we will move to a vote. And so we can open the vote on the adoption of F.3. I'm going to leave this open for about 20 more seconds. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 47 in favor and 49 against, F.3 does not pass. I just want to let the body know that I was keeping a very close eye on how the votes were coming in, and it had been several seconds before any additional votes had come in when I closed the vote because of how I was keeping an eye on it because of how tight it was. So by 2 votes, F.3 does not pass. Okay. That moves us to F.4, fixed bid deadlines, which is on page 43 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has been set to 6 minutes. And so I will recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor of F.4, and anyone else wishing to speak to F.4 should submit a request to do so.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I'm back again. This goes to something else that has arisen actually several times in the last 5 or 6 years. We've had convention dates move, and because the deadline for site selection filing is fixed when the convention starts, if the convention moves, that deadline moves. Especially with the passage of E.1 the other day, I think this is actually mechanically necessary because we don't get into a situation where we have active bids. Suddenly we don't have active bids. Oh, we have active bids again, for example. This is more of a technical fix in many respects, but I think it does serve. It will serve well to ensure that there is no ambiguity and that we don't end up with filing reopening if a convention has to slide back again, as happened in 2021. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.4. I'm going to recognize Perry Ann Lurie for a speech against F.4. And then I will recognize Laura Miller if there's no other speech in favor that has come in.
Perry Ann Lurie, she, her. There's a huge problem with this. If the convention moves earlier than its original dates, it is possible that the bid deadline would be after the convention. And therefore, I recommend that we either refer this to committee or just vote it down.
Okay. Thank you. That was a speech against F.4. I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech against F.4. And then if I don't have any other speeches in favor, I will recognize Nicholas White for a speech against.
Okay, Laura Miller, she, her. Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. I think that it is currently properly pegged to the actual convention. I think like happened when the convention was delayed, and I think there should have been no question that Winnipeg, could actually have a bid in that time. And the fact that they weren't allowed, or at first, they were talking about not opening it back up. I think they should have actually, if it moves later, then everybody has more time. If it moves earlier, then, well, if you don't have your bid paperwork in order to get it in, then, you have to wait. I think it's properly pegged to the actual date of when the actual site selection happens. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Adam Michaud for a speech in favor, and then Nicholas White for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Adam Michaud, he, him. I just wanted to respond to one of the earlier comments about the possibility of this moving the date before the actual site selection. There's actually an interaction between a couple of constitutional clauses here. There's a separate clause that circumscribes the dates where the con can be scheduled. There is theoretically this possibility, but you would have to schedule the Worldcon for the latest possible date and move it to the earliest possible date to be to go all the way over the 180-day interval specified in this in this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, that was a speech in favor. I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech against.
Thank you, mixed chairperson Nicholas White, he, him. Folks, in an ideal world, this will never happen. In an ideal world, the Worldcon dates will never change and there won't be an issue. What we're talking about is how to cover a situation where through force majeure, the Worldcon has to change its dates. In those circumstances, I believe that Worldcon committees deserve the maximum flexibility that we can allow them. I don't think that irreparable harm is done under the current rules, and I don't think that this improves the situation in any way. I think it actually makes things much more difficult. So I urge people to vote against this this unnecessary amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.4. Okay, I do have a motion from Kayla Allen to end debate. Is there a second? Okay, I do see several seconds. Thank you. Okay, so the contents, the folks wishing to speak right now. So we have one person wishing to speak in favor who has already spoken once. We have two people wishing to speak against and no other speakers that have submitted a request to speak. Is there any objection to moving to a vote? If so, please raise the hand. Okay, not seeing any objection, we will go ahead and move to a vote. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of F.4. Fixed bid deadlines. Once again, this will require a majority vote. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 14 in favor and 72 against, F.4 fails. Okay. That brings us to F.5, advance notice of business meeting deadlines, which can be found on page 45 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has already been set to 6 minutes. One of the original speakers, or one of the original proposers rather, wishes to speak to it. They can raise the hand, and anybody else wishing to speak to F.5 can submit a request to do so. And I'll recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor of F.5.
Yes, mixed chair. Thank you very much. Basically, we've got the deadline in the Constitution, but there's a excuse me. The risk of business meeting deadlines moving around seems to be problematic if a convention jumps around, and I think we should have it pinned down. There's been discussion outside of here that, how do I put this? Fans work better with clear deadlines, and this will avoid committees potentially getting accordioned within the calendar year if the business meeting ends up running substantially earlier than is expected for whatever reason. I do realize the concerns about force majeure. At some point, though, given the nature of drafting business and the nature of committee operations, I think we do need certainty, and this would provide that.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.5. I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech against F.5. And then I will recognize Alan Fleming.
Laura Miller, she, her. Thank you, next chairperson. I feel, again, similar to the previous proposal, I feel like we need to keep it pegged where it is pegged right now. The 30 days before the business meeting time limit for reports and proposals is for the business meeting staff, and they need to be able to be flexible to do that. And if for whatever reason it moves up earlier than you're prepared to give your proposal, then you can either submit it late or you can, you know, have another year to prepare it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against F.5. I don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak in favor, so I'll recognize Alan Fleming for a speech against F.5.
Alan Fleming, he, him again. Thank you, Mixed Chair. This motion has several problems. I really dislike the setting of the deadline and therefore forcing WSFS committees, WSFS division's hands by the 1st of January. There is no need to reduce their flexibility in that way. There is, again, my standard point, there is no need to put something like this in the Constitution. And this can be left in the hands of the WSFS division of any convention. They can just move the dates of the business meeting earlier. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.5. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to F.5 currently. I'm going to give you all a few more moments to see if anybody else wishes to speak. Okay, see no one else wishing to speak, we will go ahead and move to a vote on the adoption of F.5, Advance Notice of Business Meeting Deadlines. We can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of F.5. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 19 in favor and 72 against, F.5 fails. That brings us to F.6, responsive late business, which is found on page 46 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has already been set to 6 minutes. One of the original, I will recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor as one of the original proposers, and anybody else wishing to speak to F.6 can submit a request to do so.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Cliff Dunn here again, and by the way, I want to apologize for the disconnect in name I'm being introduced with versus badge name. That's a technical issue, and I do apologize to everybody for the disconnect there. Anyhow, as to this item, we've had a number of committees that have either not submitted reports or have submitted reports not really dealing with what was sent to them, and people only find out that there was no business, that the business was sent to them was not handled in a given year when the agenda comes out, and I think we need to have a window for that. I know this has caused issues with multiple committees over the last 5 or 6 years. So I understand some may wish to have another solution to this, such as setting an earlier deadline for committees to report or something like that, but we have to do something here because business is getting lost, and as a result of committees deciding that they would rather not deal with it, or committees completely falling apart. And yes, I realize this is symptomatic of a flawed committee system. That's something of another more complicated problem. We can at least let people bring their business back up if it goes poof. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.6. I'm going to recognize John Coxon for a speech against F.6. And then I will recognize Joshua Cronengold for a speech in favor. So John Coxon, if you're able to raise the hand in Zoom so we can request you unmute.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. John Coxon, he, him. I think this amendment highlights the issue with non-responsive committees well. However, committees tend to be asked to consider difficult questions that need deep thought, and I worry that this amendment will encourage hastily written business in the new 7-day window, which will simply take up time of a meeting before likely being sent back to committee. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.6. Going to recognize Joshua Cronengold for a speech in favor, and then Allison Scott to speak for a speech against.
Joshua Cronengold, he, him. So the the case where the previous speaker talks about where a business might be returned to the WSFS and then been sent right back to committee is a success. The issue this is trying to fail is where something was sent to a committee, the committee failed in some fashion, and then it disappears entirely, and there's no good way to bring it back. This would at least give a way to respond to that kind of committee failure that doesn't exist now. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.6. I'm going to recognize Allison Scott for a speech in favor, or sorry, against. Josh was in favor. Allison Scott's against F.6. I'm recognizing Allison Scott.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Alison Scott, she, her. I think there could be an issue here, but I think saying, oh, well, we'll give everyone 7 days to have a mad round is not the solution. I think if we think this is a real problem, we should go away and think about it and come back with something that requires committees to report earlier. So there is a time to do this work between a committee deadline and the call for business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a speech against F.6. Okay. I'm going to recognize. Okay, I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a motion.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I would like to move to refer this to a committee that I will not be chairing, that would report back next year with an eye towards fixing the issues that some people have raised. But I would like to make sure that this gets dealt with eventually, because it is a problem, and I think we are all acknowledging that it is a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that was a motion to refer to committee. I do see several seconds, so it's been moved and seconded to refer this to a committee, not to be chaired by Cliff Dunn / Gray Anderson. Per our standing rules, the two of the original proposers of F.6 would be placed on that committee automatically. Cliff and Joshua would have rights of first refusal as the first two listed proposers. Okay, I'm going to recommend a debate time of 2 total minutes for the motion to refer to committee. I have a parliamentary inquiry if this can be referred to a committee that already exists. That would be a motion to amend to refer, sorry, a motion to amend the referral. So I have a sneaking suspicion I know which committee we want to refer this to, but I'm going to recognize Mark if he wishes to make that amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Presiding Officer Mark Godden, he, him. If we would like to, I would wish to make an amendment to refer this motion, if we're going to refer it to a committee, to the committee that already exists to study the business meeting and its structures.
Okay.
So
are you wanting to refer this to the business meeting study group or to the nitpicking and fly specking committee?
To the business meeting study
Okay,
group.
to the business meeting study group. Okay. Okay, so it has been moved to amend the referral to refer it to the business meetings study group. I'm going to take raise hand. Okay, wait, I do have several seconds. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask the body, is there any objection to adopting this amendment to the referral? Okay, I see several raised hands. So, okay, we don't want to just take up the amendment to the referral. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna just ask, is there any objection to moving to an immediate vote on the amendment to refer the committee? Okay, there is. People want to speak to it. Okay. I'm going to say that this debate time is going to come out of the debate time of the motion to refer. I have a parliamentary inquiry about when the last time the business meeting study group reported. The business meeting study group reported at the preliminary business meeting of this year's of this year, so 2 weeks ago, approximately. And then they also reported last year, which was the first year of their existence to do any reporting. Okay. If we have any speeches against the amendment to the referral, if we can please toss those in the third order folder for my speaker moderators. Okay. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech against the amendment to the referral.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I would prefer this to go to a standalone committee because I think the Business Meeting Study Committee rather has their hands full with a bunch of deeper questions, and this would simply small off a fourth subcommittee within that committee. I think a standalone committee of about 3 to 5 people could handle this much more smoothly, and I doubt there would be any serious interaction with what the Business Meeting Study Group is doing as things stand.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against amending the referral to committee. Okay. I don't see anybody speaking in favor. Okay, no, I'll recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor of the amendment to refer. And then I will recognize John Coxon, with the other Coxon spelling, for a speech against the amendment to the referral.
I was going to say that this is Tammy Coxon, she, her. I was going to say that I thought the amendment was germane to the business meeting study group and would be thought well about being looked at in context. But I know John is a member of that committee, and if he's against it, then I would not, then I would abide by whatever John thinks is appropriate from a committee perspective.
Okay, thank you. So that was a speech. I think it turned into a speech against the amendment of the referral. I have a parliamentary inquiry about if this is a committee to report back next year or next week. I don't believe it was specified in the referral. Generally speaking, unless it's specified, so it would be up to the committee.
It was specified in the referral as next year.
Oh, it was? Okay, it was specified
Yes.
as next year. Thank you. Okay, so it would report back next year. Okay. I want to make sure I'm clear on what all I have. Okay, I don't think I have anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment of the referral. So to be clear, I'm gonna walk us through the entire stack to make sure we're all clear on what's happening right now. So F.6 was proposed. Okay, there's been some debate about it, and so then a motion was made to refer it to a committee, not to be chaired by Cliff Dunn, to report back next year to address some of the concerns that arose in debate. And then we had a motion to amend that referral to, instead of sending it to a new committee, to send it to the business meeting study group. And so that is the item that is currently in front of us, is whether or not to amend that referral to send it to the business meeting study group instead of a new committee, should the referral pass. Okay, I have a point of order that John Coxon wanted to speak on the amendment. I believe he retracted it because it's not in my folder anymore. So, yes, and he just submitted another, I think my staff popped the retraction back in. So yes, you made his point for him, I think, Tammy. And so he retracted that request. Okay, sorry, my staff is. Okay, there was a retraction. Okay, John Coxon, if you want to speak to this, because I'm now confused, can you raise the hand in Zoom? And if you don't raise the hand in Zoom, I'm going to assume you don't want to speak to it. Okay. I think that's okay. Sorry, I'm laughing because he submitted another retraction just to make sure I'm clear on what's going on. Okay, he definitely retracted the request. Cool. Okay. I then have a parliamentary inquiry, or sorry, request for information of where is there a list of all of the current committees and their constituent members. So in the committee reports, they should have, that are in Appendix A, there should be a list of who makes up that committee. If they included that in their report. I think we have one report that doesn't include that, but it's not a committee that was reconstituted. We did form the new committee, D.5, that exists now, and so is not in the agenda because it was just created this year. So the committees that currently exist are MPC, nitpicking and fly specking, Worldcon Runner Guides Editorial Committee, and the Folly Committee. And then of our special committees, we reconstituted the Business Meeting Study Group, and we created the new D.5 committee for handling the bidding trust and safety resolution. Those are, I believe, the committees that we currently have, because I don't think we've sent anything else to a committee. Okay, so that answers, hopefully, that request for information. Okay. Okay. I still don't have anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment on the referral, so we are going to go ahead and move. Okay, so I have a request for a report on the speaker pool. Okay, so for the item of business directly in front of us, which is the amendment to the referral to committee, I do not have any requests to speak currently in the pool. For the referral itself, I do not have anybody else wishing to speak to it that I can see. We can go ahead and move Mark and Gray's motions out of the reviewed tab, speaker moderators, as they've both been handled. Okay, I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to the referral to the committee. I think there is a motion to call the question on the referral to committee. On the underlying F.6, I have 3 people wishing to speak against and 1 person wishing to make an amendment. So that is the contents of the speaker pool. Okay. We are going to move to a vote. What we are voting on is whether to amend the referral to change it from a committee that does not yet exist to the Business Meeting Study Group. And this will require a majority vote. So we can go ahead and open the vote on whether or not to amend the referral. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 32 in favor and 54 against, the motion to amend the referral does not pass. And so now we are to the motion to refer F.6 to a committee not to be chaired by Cliff Dunn. Okay. I do not yet have anybody else wishing to speak to the motion to refer to committee. Seeing none. Speaking slowly in case somebody does want to jump in. But I'm going to go ahead and say we can move to a vote on whether to refer to committee. So the question in front of us is whether to refer F.8 to a committee not to be chaired by Cliff Dunn. And we can go ahead and open the vote. This is a majority vote.
F.6.
F.6. Yeah, the thing, yeah. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. with 56 in favor and 35 against, the motion to refer passes. If you are interested in serving on the F.6 committee, please email bm-committee@lacon.org. And if you are willing to chair the committee, please include that in your email. This will get posted in the notices section later. And I will, we'll see who all wants to be on the committee. I will probably just pick who the chair is and then forward them the relevant persons who have expressed interest in being on the F.6 committee. Okay. F.7, as previously discussed, was withdrawn for consideration by the maker and so is no longer in front of us. We already handled F.8 earlier in today's meeting, and so we are going to move to F.9, the tie that doesn't bind, which is on page 58 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has already been set to 4 minutes. So anyone wishing to speak to F.9 can submit a request to do so. And if one of the original makers wants to raise the hand, I will recognize them. And I will recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Thank you very much, Mixed Chairperson Nicholas White, he, him. I should say if Andrew January is in the room, he should feel free to jump in as well. This is entirely thanks to Andrew, who spotted a edge case within the EPH algorithm as it's currently legislated, which led to a perverse conclusion where if through a tie we had 7 finalists on the ballot and one of them withdrew, that we would then have to co-opt a different 7th person to be on the ballot, when clearly it's the spirit of the rules, although not the way that they're written, that ideally we should have 6 people on the ballot, 6 finalists on the ballot in every category. So it simply tidies that up. And I don't think it's controversial. I hope people will vote for it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of F.9. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak against F.9, so I'll recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor.
Tammy Coxon, she, her, just didn't have time to retract my request. Nicholas said everything I wanted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that was not a speech at all. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to F.9. I'm going to give you all a few more moments to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak to it. Okay. I do have a motion to call the question, but with nobody else wishing to speak to F.9, we don't need to take a vote on that. Okay. So we will go ahead and move to a vote. And so we can open the vote on the adoption of F.9. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 89 in favor and 1 against, F.9 passes. Was real close to being unanimous, but the no came in shortly before I closed it. Okay. So that is, so F.9 passes and will go to 2027 for ratification. Okay. We had a late item of business submitted. So this is a resolution, and so it is being numbered D.6 because it is an eligibility extension. It's being numbered D.6 because it's a resolution, and it's a resolution because it's an eligibility extension. And so the text of that is up on the screen. I'm going to recommend a total debate time for this item of 4 minutes. And I guess I clear. So Olaf basically made the motion by submitting it. People have seconded it via Lumi and told me they're seconding it, and it has more than one maker. So it's properly in front of us. I'm recommending. Oh, wrong. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. You're right. It's D.10 because of the trial committee resolutions. I forgot about those. because they're not in the list that I have in front of me of things that I've set debate times for. So you're right, it is D.10. Okay, I'm recommending 4 total minutes of debate time. Is there any objection to setting the debate time of this for 4 minutes? And it's still going to say D.6 on the sidebar because that's not easy to change. Okay, I don't see any objection, and so debate time for this is set at 4 minutes. I'm going to recognize Olav Rockney for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Olav Rockney, he, him. The event is a story that was published in Jewish Currents, a non-science fiction magazine with a print circulation of just 5,200, which is extremely limited and does not reach WSFS membership by and large. It became widely available on July 9th of this year, far after the deadline to nominate works for the Hugo. The author Henry Bean, an 80-year-old filmmaker, spent 5 years on the story, interviewed people from Gaza, had sensitivity readers from the Palestinian community, and really attempted to grapple with some important issues surrounding the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I think he largely succeeds. I think it's a very good novelette, and it's one that I would like to put forward for an extension of eligibility due to its extremely limited distribution last year.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of D.10, the eligibility extension for the event. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for another speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. As the person who led the charge to knock down a pair of eligibility extensions because I didn't think they were quite what these should be used for, this is almost the definition of why we have eligibility extensions. It is a story that had extremely limited circulation, wasn't even WSFS adjacent, and basically I think none of us had heard of it until it came across our desks a couple of weeks ago. So this really should have its eligibility extended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of D.10. Okay, I have a motion to end debate on D.10, but nobody else wishing to speak to it. So with nobody else wishing to speak to D.10, we can just go ahead and move to a vote. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of D.10, the eligibility extension for the event. And we can go ahead and close the vote. With 76 in favor and 16 against, the eligibility extension passes. And so the eligibility extension for the event will be extended by 1 year. Okay. Okay, at this point, we have gotten through all of the non-executive session business in front of us. Okay, so next week, we will be beginning the meeting in executive session to take up the report from the trial committee. That report is not quite ready yet. There are a few questions around how some things are phrased and wanting to make sure that we're not getting ourselves in trouble. I want to be very clear that the delay is entirely my fault and it is not the fault of the trial committee. Any blame about the timing of it should be placed on me. But the report and the minutes from last year's executive session will be available on the Lumi platform by Wednesday, if not before, which will leave you plenty of time to review it before our meeting on Sunday, August 9th. We will post in the Discord when the documents are available. We will also, I don't control social media channels, so I'm not promising that it will be anywhere, that the announcement of it being available will be anywhere other than the Discord, but I will try to make that happen. But it will be there by Wednesday. Like last year, the documents will only be available to view, not to download. And if you have accessibility issues with viewing and reading the documents in the Lumi platform, please let us know by emailing the bm-help@lacon.org or businessmeeting@lacon.org, and we will work with you to help you with those accessibility issues. We did have a parliamentary inquiry that was posed about when it comes to a trial committee report, or really anything discussed in executive session, that it should only be discussed with other WSFS members. And for the purpose of that discussion, who qualifies as a WSFS member? So according to our Constitution, the membership, so section 1.4, the membership of WSFS consists of all people who have paid membership dues to the committee of the current Worldcon. So that means that people who are WSFS members of LAcon are WSFS members of WSFS right now. At the close of LAcon, then the people who are WSFS members of Montreal turn into the current WSFS members. I agree, it's a little confusing, but we don't need to fix it this year if we want to fix it. That was not a suggestion for somebody to submit a constitutional amendment, just to be clear. Okay. I'm making sure that I don't have any other high priority items that have come in. Okay. So, not seeing anything else, we will go ahead and end early today. I feel like I'm jinxing it just by saying it. But yeah, and we will see you all on August 9th in executive session. Thank you very much.